See if everybody is awake. We're up on Facebook. Welcome to Facebook. And waiting for Twitch and for YouTube to log on. Looks like that's starting to happen. So once it does, we'll actually start our program. I believe YouTube has joined us, and now it's just Twitch that we're waiting for. So welcome, world, and Twitch is with us. We are united as one. Welcome to my second deep dive. This is Alan Williams talking. Sorry, I could not, for some reason, get my camera picture-in-picture thing to work today, so you'll just have to take my word for it that it's me talking and not some faceless imposter. Today, I wanted to celebrate. We have a third single from the album that just came out this past week, and the video premieres next week. So I thought we'd focus on that track today, and that is Before I Wake Up. So for those of you not familiar with the record yet, let me just play a little bit of it, and you can get a sense of the music in your ears, and then we'll go back and talk about some of what I at least find interesting. So here we are, just a little snippet or so of the track Before I Wake Up.
What's a boy to do? I can't hold on and I can't let go. It's such a lovely view, but wishing just won't make it so.
So you get the sense of it there. Unlike some of the other tracks on the album, this is a relatively straight-ahead recording in that it's really based around kind of a group ensemble performance. It doesn't have the sounds of crickets and trains running around. It doesn't have a lot of processed vocals, that sort of thing. So the challenge in how to craft a mix for this track was basically to think, how can I create a sound field that might evoke the sense that you're sitting in front of this band playing. And one of the ways that we do that, of course, is using in stereo, using the left and right channels to kind of create a sense of maybe a sound stage is the phrase that's often used. And one of the things I wanted to focus on today was the relationship between a musical arrangement and then how you translate that in the mix, and how sometimes you might actually think about the mix while you're thinking about the arrangement. And to illustrate that, I thought I'd just show how this arrangement builds from the top of the song. And one of the ways that we do that is this song starts kind of as if it were just going to be a solo folky thing. My acoustic guitar, my voice, and one other electric guitar. So here's the opening.
I know I've crossed the line. I've crossed it time and time again. Away good Valentine, something more than just a friend.
All right, so we're basically, and of course the bass and the drums come in and they'll stay in for the rest of the track. But what I'm trying to evoke there is I've got my acoustic guitar is actually recorded both in stereo with two microphones and a third signal, left and right acoustic here, as you can see, and then a direct injection, as it were, a DI. So that's just giving a little bit, and you can see in the mix it's fairly low. When we record a guitar like that, theoretically, if I did my job right, my left and right channels might be equally balanced to give you a sense of me playing guitar right in front of you. But if you look here, the faders are not evenly matched. I've given the right channel of that guitar much more level in the mix than I am giving the left channel. Why? Well, because in the opening phase of this track, there's only one other instrument, and that's the electric guitar. I've split that signal into two different things for different sections of the arrangement, but right now we're listening to what's called electric guitar 1. And you may note that it's panned much more to the left. So what I'm really thinking about here is not just a left-right balance of my acoustic guitar, but a left-right balance of the musical arrangement. So I want my acoustic guitar to slightly be in the right channel, and then when that electric guitar becomes a little more active, you hear an interplay between those two instruments. Let me mute my vocal, as I am often wanting to do, and go back and play this intro, and you'll hear just the interplay between the instruments that way. Acoustic guitar with the electric guitar playing chords. And you can sort of hear on the left channel there, the electric guitar has a little bit of its own space, whereas the acoustic guitar is still relatively center. It's just slightly leaning to the right. The drums are in regular stereo, bass is dead center. Now, why do that? Well, it's because I'm getting ready for what happens in the B section of the song. So in the arrangement of the song, I'm thinking about how can I slowly introduce more instruments, building a little more drama, adding a little tension. And what's about to happen is the piano is going to make an entrance. And I bet you can guess where in the stereo field that piano will show up. Here it comes. More in the right channel, or at least more in the right channel than in the left. Interestingly, and this is often the case when we record certain types of instruments, pianos, for example, although I'll confess this is a sample, a digital sample library, nonetheless, it comes as a stereo set of samples. And a lot of instruments are recorded in stereo, like my acoustic guitar was recorded in stereo. This presents a whole lot of challenges. It gives you a wider sense of the instrument itself in a physical space, but then when you come down to the mix, suddenly you're not able to put that piano centered left, right, because it needs to relate to other instruments. Let's come here for a second. This is the solo piano. This is if you kept it stereo centered. If you're really listening, not that you aren't listening, but if you can really hear it, you might note that the lower octave, the left hand of the piano, is a little more in the left channel, the upper parts of the piano are in the right channel. That's wonderful when you're dealing with just listening to piano on its own, but I've got to fit this piano into the arrangement, and that's why I'm leaning it over here and to the right. I'm also leaning it to the right rather than the left for exactly that reason. The upper voices of the piano, the more active parts, the parts that are going to give me a little more melodic information, they're in the right channel. So if I deferred to the left channel of the piano, we would hear these low octaves and less of what I want to hear in the piano. That's why the electric guitar that starts is panned left. It's not that that guitar has to be left, but rather I know that I want the electric guitar and the piano to also function as a unit. So here they are together. You can barely hear that electric guitar. It almost feels like it's the piano. Let me take the electric guitar out and you'll hear it disappear. Coming back in. And that's kind of the beauty of it. They can work well together as if they were sort of one instrument, providing a different type of information. Let me roll back, take these out of solo, and hear how acoustic guitar, the rhythm electric guitar, bass drums, and the voice, actually I think may still have the voice muted, let me see. I do. Let's just listen instrumentally, that's not bad. Again, acoustic guitar keeping more rhythm, electric guitar just playing the chords as they go by. And then we get ready for our piano entrance. And of course, with the musical instrument, the arrangement, I'm going to need another instrument to come in and help us when we get to the chorus, the big chorus. My voice is going to get a little bigger. We're not going to hear it right now. So I'm going to need to support that with more sound. And for that, we bring in the organ. So get ready after this little break. Here comes the organ entrance. Okay, let's look at that organ relationship, because like the piano, it too is coming at us as a stereo send. Here are my two organ channels that I'm working with right now. This is something else in a minute. So one channel that is hard left, the other is slightly leaning to the left. So you can almost picture like the clock hands where we're looking at something that's like 7 o'clock in the evening in terms of its panning. That's allowing us to hear, I'll solo up this organ because one of the trademark characteristics of an electric organ is the rotating Leslie speaker. And so you want to be able to hear maybe some of that rotation coming down. Here comes the bit. I could sum all of that to mono, but we at least get a little sense of the vibrating, rotating speaker moving very quickly in that case, left and right. And that's why not just completely hard pan it left. So let's roll back a little bit and hear again, without the vocal, the band. Okay, now something's about to happen because we can feel in the musical arrangement things are going to change. One of the things that happens is Nate Sharples, the organ player here, is going to change the sound of his instrument. He's going to slow that Leslie down and change the tone bars so it's actually a little lower frequencies rather than the high ones. Let's hear him make that transition. And then he adds some extra accompanying little lines. That's what the additional pair of tracks is for. So here's just the organ. Now he's changed the timbre. That's one thing that can happen. The other thing that happens involves the electric guitars. So this was initially one guitar performance, but I've split it up into two tracks here so I can treat them differently because they musically do something, or it, since it's the same guitar, different in different parts of the song. In the opening section and throughout the first chorus, it's basically been playing with a warmer tone and letting chords sustain. Here's what we do in the transition from the chorus into the next verse. So a couple of things there. Now functionally that electric guitar is playing, you can't hear it yet with the drums, but it's playing on the backbeats. And not every backbeat, but every other bar's backbeat. Additionally, you could really hear that I've added some delay. So while the electric guitar's initial hit is in the left channel, it gets echoed with these delays in the right channel. We'll just listen to that for a second. Now, that might be a hidden detail, and in fact, if we had a whole lot of sound happening in the mix, it might be barely noticeable. But I think, even though we've got organ, we've got a band playing, if I take this out of solo, I think you can still hear what's happening with that electric guitar because there's enough space in the musical arrangement, and so those little delays fill a little bit of space. Now, they don't call attention to themselves. Maybe not on the first listening, you may not notice it at all, but maybe 2 or 3 listens in, hey, there it is, and it's not hidden. So here's that same musical transition from chorus into verse. Okay, so musically, the arrangement begins acoustic guitar with voice, electric guitar with that. Eventually, the piano comes in. I mean, the drums and bass are in pretty much early. The piano comes in, and then to help us out with that chorus, the organ comes in. When we transition from chorus 1 into the verse, both the organ and the electric guitar change their sounds and somewhat change their musical function. The organ plays a little more active melodic stuff, and the electric guitar plays more articulated rhythm punches. Again, arrangement ideas, but helped out in the mix by, say, adding a delay to that electric guitar. Now we have another section. This is the B section, the second B section, verse 2. Something needs to happen. As an arranger, this is where I know I'm going to bring out the big guns. The real big guns are supposed to happen in the next chorus, but I want to let everybody know it's gonna get big. And so the horn section makes their entrance here. It's not an important moment. They're not doing anything particularly interesting, but just their arrival alone, again, adds a whole other tone color to the mix. And let's just go back and listen to that transition, and we'll hear the horns come in. Okay, so the horns. What have I done? Well, there's lots of different approaches when you think about arranging for horns, and I will confess, this is the first time I ever wrote for horns, and it was really a learning experience because I kept writing these arrangements and then I'd put them up against the recording, the track, and I was always too busy or maybe in the wrong registers or emphasizing colors I didn't really want to emphasize. It became an issue, an ongoing issue. Some people will argue that a horn section is more like a jazz big band where you can see maybe 7 or 8 different horn players, brass and reeds together when we talk about horns. But a more classic R&B version of that is maybe just 2 horns or in some cases 3 horns, often a trumpet and a sax. We were talking about, say, Stax tracks in the mid-60s. Those would often just be 2 horns. And then they started bringing in a 3rd horn player, and you might have a trumpet, a tenor sax, and maybe a trombone. That, in my mind, is sort of the classic horn arrangement for 3 voices. Interestingly, even though you have the option to have 3 different pitches, a lot of times horn arrangements on those kinds of records tended to double at least one of the voices. So it might just be everybody playing in unison, maybe in different octaves, or 2 of the players playing in unison and 1 person adding the harmony. That was pretty much what I was going for, but then I realized I was really missing having some underpinning, something in the low register. And I've always been partial to certain records with horn sections that employed the baritone saxophone. In particular, I've always loved the arrangement on Elton John's Honky Cat, just really hearing the bari sax wail at the bottom end of the mix. So that's what I ended up writing for. You have trumpet and trombone from the brass section. You have a tenor sax and you have a bari sax. And let me, it'll be easier if I create one of these somewhere. All right, wherever you went. I can't see her. I'll just have to roll back. So, just soloing these guys up. Here's my horn section at their entrance. Now, in many cases, I believe it's the trumpet and the trombone that are doubling in octaves. Now, they just varied right there. Sometimes you might throw the tenor in to double that trumpet, depending on the voice part. So they're not doubled here, and then I think they do double for that moment. Actually, they were in harmony the whole time. I guess I went for a chord. And the bari sax on the bottom isn't nearly as active as the upper parts. It doesn't move as much. It holds the fundamental almost like a bass player would. I'll just solo the baritone sax up here for a second. You can hear that. And all four in together. Okay, now the horn section, we can think of, they are four different instruments, but I like to think of them as one instrument in many ways. And just like the challenge of the piano, of the Leslie organ, what to do with all these sounds across the stereo spectrum. Because you could theoretically put all these horns in the same location as if they were really tightly standing together. But of course it's four human beings and they take a little bit of time, and why not take advantage, take a little space, why not take advantage of creating that space in terms of where one might pan those instruments? So let's see, where did I pan them? So if we look here, right now I'm looking at this section. So closer to the center, I've placed the trumpet and the trombone. They're still panned a little bit left for the trumpet, right for the trombone. But they're somewhat in the center of the picture. And then on either end, further left is that tenor and further right is the baritone sax. This called into question a couple of things. I actually recorded these guys here at the aviary, and what you're hearing reflects the way they were positioned. So the four of them were sort of facing the microphones and facing me. And to my left, at the farthest end, was the tenor. In the middle was the trumpet and the trombone, and on the other end was the bari sax. Part of that is because I wanted the bari sax to be able to stand out a little bit, knowing that it didn't function the way the other horn section did. So I wanted him over to the other side. I thought about putting the brass, because they tend to double, more in the center, and you would hear it almost as one instrument. And the reason I want the trumpet closer to the center is because later on you're going to hear a fantastic trumpet solo, and I knew that was going to happen in the mix. So while I'm thinking about both writing the horn parts, how are they going to relate to the rest of the instruments, I'm also recording the trumpet in the horn section, thinking, where am I going to place the trumpet in the mix of the final, mix of all the other instruments? So again, how you arrange, how you record, and then how you end up mixing, they're all interrelated. If you're lucky, you've thought all this through and everything works. If you're unlucky, sometimes you can paint yourself into a corner and stereo becomes a headache rather than a solution. In this case, I did think about it enough to I think, mirror what I wanted in the mix and when I tracked the band. Okay, tenor, trumpet, trombone, bari sax. Let's roll back, take this out of solo, and let's give my abused vocal just allow it to function in the mix a little bit. So if we roll this mix back a bit and hear this B section going into the chorus, you'll hear how all these instrument entrances are meant to still be in service of the vocal, building tension, building drama, and supporting, because the vocal gets a little louder, a little bigger, and it's nice to have more sound to sing against. So here's the second verse getting us into the B section, and we'll hear how those horns work with the vocal. Sometimes a little bit of melodic answering, but not very much, or at least hopefully not too much.
So what's a boy to do? I can't hold on and I can't let go. It's such a lovely view.
right, so there's the band, second chorus, everything's in. Harkening back to the prior song that we worked on last week, here's my trademark go in and isolate all of the toms in the drum kit and mute them or cut them out so they only appear when they actually are playing and you don't hear the leakage of the rest of the drum kit. That's why you see all these little holes and gaps here. And while I was looking at that, I noticed one more thing. Maybe you heard it, maybe you saw it. So we're still layering instruments, still trying to build a little drama. Now I've got a horn section that comes in the B section. So what can I do for chorus 2 that makes it bigger than chorus 1? The answer is right here. The tambourine. You'll note there's no tambourine up until right here when we get into the second chorus. So let me solo up the tambourine and the drum kit and you'll hear how they relate. This is certainly not any kind of arrangement structure that I invented. It's a very common ploy, frequently utilized. But here's what it sounds like. Let's see. This is a good place to. Yeah, we'll give a little bit of the band without the tambourine, and then you'll hear it come in at the top of the second chorus. Ben Whitman on drums. I'll take that tambourine out. You'll hear it go away more than you hear it enter. But there it is. And just looking at what this visual here, you can anticipate, I see, the tambourine's going to play through that chorus and then disappear again, come back for the end, right? So a lot of times mixers, arrangers will add a little percussion, especially when they've already done something like a chorus. Next time you come to the chorus, maybe the percussion will be just a small color that distinguishes first chorus from second chorus, for example. And in this case, the tambourine is simply doubling with that snare, but it adds just a little extra attack to that backbeat during these choruses. Okay, there's that as we talked about. Let's look at the really cool thing, which is, this is Garrett Michelson, a faculty member with me at UMass Lowell. In fact, all the horn section are UMass Lowell folks, both teachers and students. Garrett is playing the trumpet solo, and you'll hear, I'm going to solo up the section so that we hear the horn section, and then you'll hear Garrett's solo. And you'll note that a couple of things happen in the mix, and I'll look at them in a second, to distinguish what's happening to the trumpet when he's part of a section versus what happens to the trumpet when he's soloing. So here's the horn section coming into, or the second part of the chorus going into the solo. And I apologize for the crackling. That's just my computer working really hard. But if you can hear that, maybe I can illustrate it more looking at the mix console of that. But when it's time for, there is a little bit of a reverberant space that I've placed the horn section in together. And that includes the trumpet. But when it's time for the actual trumpet solo, let's see. Aha. Let me grab it off this other screen and bring it in for us to see. Okay. So you're looking here, and I see I'm ready to have a delay applied to the trumpet, but it's not actually being applied while the horn section is playing. And then during the solo, it adds delay. So let's, I was afraid that was going to happen. Roll back here. Let me see if calling up the mix console will bring me up. Nope, it won't. That's all right. Here you go. Here comes the delay. Actually, I didn't use it. I hear it, so it's coming from somewhere else. Yeah. It's a great solo. Let's take it out of solo mode. Let me just let the solo happen with the full band and see if all that treatment, that delay and the extra reverb is audible to you, and if it sort of seems less like he's trumpet playing in some sort of space age sci-fi novel and actually more in a physical space with a full band. So Garrett Michelson, one of my favorite parts of the album. Just to hear that trumpet solo again is a joy. Okay, so basically by this point, I've done everything I can do in terms of introducing instruments and treating those instruments slightly differently depending on their function at various points in the song. So from here on out, we're basically fairly static in our mix. And the only thing I did to try to add a little something was to sneak a second vocal in underneath the last little, well, you'll hear it. So I have a big chorus and then I have a big falsetto moment. Underneath the falsetto moment is actually a harmony. I bury it in the mix so hopefully it doesn't call attention to itself, and yet it's there. And the question sometimes with these mix moves is, if you're going to go to all the trouble to add these little things, it's very easy to make them so little that you might as well not have added them at all. And that's something I think made the mistake of doing many times. So it's always a question, is the added little color loud enough? Sometimes that added little color, if it's too loud, becomes distracting. So let me just play the last of the song, and you'll hear my big dramatic vocal bit. See if you can hear this second harmony vocal, and then maybe I'll solo it up and you'll hear the two of them together, how they're working together. But here's the rest of the track. The drama is in the arrangement and hopefully in the performance. There's not a whole lot of mix trickery going on at this point.
I close my eyes, I close my eyes, and I fall in love with you before you wake up inside. Fall in love with you before you wake
Okay, big moment, right? Let's hear. I am kind of curious. You'll hear how goofy it sounds on its own, and it was an afterthought. But I decided to live with the afterthought. So here's what that stuff sounds like.
We'll fall in love with you before you wake up. Before you wake up in my arms. Ooh. In my arms. Ooh.
Okay, that's embarrassing. It's really not particularly good, but functionally it did what I needed, so I didn't spend a whole lot of time worrying about it, I think. In the end, I'm really happy with this mix because I think it does what it's supposed to do in terms of generating just a sense of a full band playing in a room. Now, it's heightened reality. Obviously, you're probably noticing the reverb chambers that I've created are bigger than a band might be playing in a room. Those drums sound like they're coming down from Valhalla, right? Instead of Ben's basement. But nonetheless, even though it's larger than life, it's still life. It's still recognizably a set of musicians playing and hopefully, playing together, hearing the interplay between the two entities. And to, I think, the band's credit, everyone's playing in the service of the vocal. All the arrangement, when to bring instruments in, when to bring them back out, that's in the service of the vocal too. Where I place things in the stereo mix, again, in the service of the vocal, making sure that the vocal, which is in the center, has its own little space and the rest of the band is on either side of me. Yes, the kick drum, the snare, and Greg Porter on bass, they are equally in the center with me. Just so you all know, traditionally, low frequencies tend to be registered. We don't really know our brains don't decipher where those sounds come from as easily as we can pinpoint the location of things in the upper frequencies. So sometimes you're wondering, where is that rumbling coming from? You can feel it, but you can't quite get a direction as to where. The same thing happens in mixes. So low-end information like the kick drum, like the bass guitar, we put them in the center. Not all the time, but most of the time. And likewise, put the voice in the center. So now I'm giving myself an idea. Let's hear these vocals. Let's hear the bass and the kick drum in the center channel. This is the stuff that's just sitting there in the middle.
So what's a boy to do?
And you can hear that the reverb on the voice is still creating a wider spectrum.
It's such a lovely view, but wishing just won't make it so.
Now, if I open up the rest of let's just open up the overheads of the drum kit. Now you're going to hear the drum kit, but not the close mic on the hi-hat or the rack toms, but just to hear the kit in the room. Actually, you know what? Let's kill the bass. Let's kill the voice. Let's just listen to the overhead so you get a sense of drums in stereo. Now, to be fair to Ben, for my mix, I've actually gone in and carved out the rest of the drum kit. So here's the drum kit fully leaking into those mics. You can hear a little bit more of the location of where the hi-hat is, for example. But just as I've gone in and isolated the floor tom and the rack tom so I don't hear the rest of the kit in those microphones, likewise I'm using EQ to get rid of most everything below a certain frequency point or to greatly reduce it. This is where a lot of the drum information is, and this is where the overheads be more cymbals and the more of the top end of the snare, a little bit more of the top end of the floor of the toms when it comes in. But allows me just a slightly greater clarity in my view. Others would differ. Glenn Johns would definitely differ in his opinion of how to record a drum kit. But this is how I'm treating it in the mix. Let's listen to the drums alone, maybe, and hear drums in stereo with their treatment. So you hear that hi-hat pretty clearly in its left channel. When I can see a tom fill coming up. You can see the big gap. There's one coming. You'll hear rack tom in the left, floor tom very much on the right. And the full band with all that drum. And that's it. That's a little insight into the song Before I Wake Up, into the mix anyway. And I hope you all will check out. We have a really cool video that's coming out this coming week. I think on the 14th. I could have the date wrong. Keep your eyes peeled for video for Before I Wake Up. And I hope you all will join me next Sunday or whenever you get a chance to check these things out as we do further deeper dives into the tracks from Currents, my new album, which is available on all streaming platforms, wherever your tastes may lie. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week. Take care, everyone.